What's up, YouTube? How's everyone doing? I hope we're all doing well. Welcome to the first video that I have made specifically for you guys. We're not streaming. We're not doing that shit. This is specifically for you. And this is to address all of the people that have come at me calling me a fucking LINO. All right? I also get called a rhino. We can cover that one in another video. But I get called a LINO all the time. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through together the Libertarian Party platform. And let's see what I disagree with and what I agree with. Without further ado, let's just jump into it. Maybe I'll stop talking with my hands when I have my hand on my mouse. All right, so here we have the Libertarian Party platform. We have the preamble. We're going to skip that. We're going to get to like the actual policy prescription and guidelines for how to approach a policy prescription, because I think that's what actually matters here. I don't really give a fuck about their random words. They like to just put in here. So self-ownership. Individuals own their bodies and have rights over them that other individuals, groups, and governments may not violate. Individuals have the freedom and responsibility to decide what they knowingly and voluntarily consume and what risks they accept to their own health, finances, safety, or life. Yes, this is like the core idea of personal responsibility and the ability to let people have personal responsibility, I guess you could say. So I completely agree with that. Expression and communication. We support full freedom of expression and oppose government censorship, regulation, or control of communications, media, and technology. Language that is perceived to be offensive to certain groups or individuals is not a cause for any legal action. Speech that is not literally a threat of aggression or violence is not in itself aggression or violence and can never be used to justify aggression or violence. Yes, if you are not calling for violence, you are not calling for violence. It's that fucking simple. It's the whole reason that Trump is not the reason rioters broke into the Capitol on January 6th. Even alluding to something is not a call to violence, because that is up to the interpretation of the hearer to do with that as they will. We favor the freedom to engage in or abstain from any religious activities that do not violate the rights of others. Yes. We oppose government actions that either aid or attack any religion. Yes, I'd also agree with that. So far, 100% agree. Privacy. Libertarians advocate individual privacy and government transparency. We are committed to ending government's practice of spying on everyone. Yes. We support the rights recognized by the Fourth Amendment and to be secure in our persons, homes, property, and communications. Protection from unreasonable searches and seizures should include records held by third parties, such as email, medical, and library records. Yeah. So again, this is all in relation to the government. All of this is in relation to government action. On a moral level, I also support this being the like everything that we've read so far being the basis for interpersonal relationships and how you kind of approach those. But especially when it comes to government imposing on your life and whatever part of your life that we're specifically talking about. No, like as little as possible. Obviously, you know, if there is some evidence pointing towards you having CP on your computer, yeah, they can search and seize. But if you're just walking around, you know, the whole stop frisk thing, that's no bueno. That's bad. Anyways, continuing on to personal relationships. Sexual orientation, preference, gender, or gender identity should have no impact on the government's treatment of individuals. Yes. Such as in current marriage, child custody, adoption, immigration, or military service laws. Yes. That also means women join the draft, or we don't have a draft. That also means you have to fix the child custody system, but yes, that 100% yes. Government does not have the authority to define, promote, license, or restrict personal relationships, regardless of the number of participants. I'm kind of new to this train, but I'm gonna say yes for that. I used to be like opposed to legal polyamory relationships, but there's no basis for me to have that view, so I changed it. It doesn't hurt me. Why should I say that they can't be able to do that? Consenting adults should be free to choose their own sexual practices and personal relationships until such time as the government stops its illegitimate practice of marriage licensing. Such licenses must be granted to all consenting adults who apply. Okay, so when it comes to the illegitimate practice of marriage licensing, I kind of agree and kind of don't. I don't really care if the government is involved in marriage. I definitely see the argument against it. And I would be perfectly fine if the government said, we're not going to do marriage, but we're going to do civil unions or something along that lines, to where you can still get the benefits that we currently have with marriage. That's the taxes, that's the property ownership. And what I think is most important is that power of attorney, power of a will, like the ability to make decisions for your partner should they become not able to make decisions for themselves. I think that's a very important thing that can be done through something like a civil union, if the government was not going to be involved in marriage. But again, in our current state, the government is involved in marriage and should not be stopping anyone from getting said marriage. Also, all of this is consenting adults. It's very expressly written here. Everyone likes to do this thing of like libertarians are pedophiles and like want pedophilia to be okay. No, it's consenting adults. Consent is the basis for all of this. Parental rights. Parents or other guardians have the right to raise their children according to their own standards and beliefs, provided that the rights of the children to be free from abuse and neglect are also protected. I agree with this. I don't know if they're actually going to get into like education in this, but I've been wrestling with this idea because someone presented me with this and I've been thinking about it. And I still don't know my opinion on it. And it's been like a month since I heard this. Not properly educating your child. Could that be considered a form of abuse? Because you're actively putting them at a disadvantage to the rest of the world when they get released. And a lot of times this is done in communities where you really can't leave, like cult-ish communities. Like, for example, the Amish, right? Where you're not educated well. And then if you wanted to leave, you now have an extremely hard time doing that because you don't have that education that everyone else in the world has. So I think that it's an important thing to wrestle with, but I'm not going to say that I have an actual opinion on that. Yeah. Adult rights and responsibilities. Once individuals are presumed to have adequate judgment to vote and serve on a jury or in the military, they should also be presumed to have sufficient judgment to decide their own purchase and use of alcohol, tobacco, firearms, cannabis, and engage in other activities currently restricted by government due to age. Yeah, I think it should all be 18. At 18 is when you become a consenting adult, right? If we're going to go back to like the relationship sort of thing. At 18, I understand that there are negative effects for young people to be using drugs or whatever the fuck. But at the end of the day, when you make it younger, like a lot of countries in Europe do, we tend to see less drug and alcohol related problems, specifically when it comes to DUIs. And I think that's a super important thing. That also it's like a double benefit of people have freedom and also maybe no more DUIs or less DUIs. So yeah, I think that one pretty fucking solid. Crime and justice. Government force must be limited to the protection of the rights of individuals to life, liberty, and property, and governments must never be permitted to violate these rights. Yes. Laws should be limited in their application to violations of the rights of others through force or fraud or to deliberate actions that place others involuntarily at significant risks of harm. I think this is basically saying just the laws should be specific. They should not be like overbroad, and they should really just focus on when someone's rights are violated, rather than like what would be called victimless crimes. Therefore, we favor the repeal of all laws creating crimes without victim. Look at that. Look at that. Crimes without victims, such as gambling, the use of drugs for medicinal or recreational purposes, and consensual transactions involving sexual services. I 100% agree. We support restitution to the victim to the fullest degree possible at the expense of the criminal or the negligent wrongdoer. The idea behind this is good. Like I think that the idea is good. When you put it in practice with like what crime looks like in the US, just talking the ones that have a victim, it tends to be people from like a lower socioeconomic status and stuff. And I don't know if you could realistically do that and actually get the money from that, if it's money that we're talking. A good idea, maybe not practical. The constitutional rights of the criminally accused, including due process, a speedy trial, legal counsel, trial by jury, and the legal presumption of innocence until proven guilty, must be preserved. Yes. We assert the common law right of juries to judge not only the facts, but also the justice of the law. Yeah. We oppose the prosecutorial practice of overcharging in criminal prosecutions so as to avoid jury trials by intimidating defendants into accepting plea bargains. Yes. And like going on with that, specifically public defenders like to push for plea bargains. A lot of that's because they're overworked and they don't have adequate time to actually put into each case. And if we can fix that system a little bit, we'll also have a lot less plea bargains going down. Additionally, we support the abolition of qualified immunity so that law enforcement and prosecutors will be held legally accountable for misconduct that leads to wrongful convictions or other acts of injustice. Yeah, I mean, they're already criminally liable to an extent, and civil liability, that's one of those things that I'm on the fence about, because I completely understand both sides of it. I would probably lean towards yes, get rid of qualified immunity, but I'm not 100% decided. Death penalty. We oppose the administration of the death penalty by the state. In large part, I agree with this. The caveat that I hold there is that if this is a case where someone, even when in prison, even when in max security prison, are still a danger to the public, they're still a danger to violating people's rights, that is when you can look at death penalty. Telltale example of this would be Ted Bundy, right? When you put him in the prison, what happened? He got out. What happened when he got out? He killed more people. And this was a trend. I think he did it twice. So someone like that, where even in prison, they are still and have proven to still pose a risk to the public, that's when you can start talking about it. You also have to have things like, it has to be heinous crimes. It has to be repeated heinous crimes. Like, it's not just like you commit a murder and so you get the death penalty. That's fucked. There are scenarios where it could be used, and I would be okay with it. Self-defense. The only legitimate use of force is in defense of individual rights, life, liberty, and justly acquired property against aggression. Yes, for the most part, yes. This right inheres in the individual who may agree to be aided by any other individual or group. Yeah, okay. That's what I was kind of going to add there, is that you can also protect someone else. We affirm the individual right recognized by the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms and oppose the prosecution of individuals for exercising their rights of self-defense. Same. Private property owners should be free to establish their own conditions regarding the presence of personal defense weapons on their own property. Yes. We oppose all laws at any level of government restricting, registering, or monitoring the ownership, manufacture, or transfer of firearms, ammunition, or firearm accessories. You do need to have some level of restriction. All right, that comes with like age restriction is one example. Also, if you have mental conditions or have been actively giving threats to someone, I think that is a fair reason for saying, hey, no, or maybe just not right now. That is personal liberty done. All right, I think that I agree pretty fucking much so far. Let's go to economic liberty. Aggression, property, and contract. Aggression is the use, trespass against, or invasion of the borders of another person's owned resource without the owner's consent or the threat thereof. We oppose all acts of aggression as illegitimate and unjust, whether committed by private actors or the state. Okay, well, there are cases, kind of like we can go back to the CP example I was given earlier, where you have to do that sometimes. The state does. So there are exceptions to this, but in general, yes. Each person is the presumptive owner of his or her own body, which right may be forfeited only as a consequence of committing an act of aggression. Yes. Property rights in external scarce resources are determined in accordance with the principles of the original appropriation of homesteading, whereby a person becomes an owner of an unowned resource by first use and transformation. Yeah. Contract, whereby the owner consensually transfers ownership to another person. Yes. And rectification, whereby owner's property rights in certain resources are transferred to a victim of the owner's tort, trespass, or aggression to compensate the victim. Yeah, all of this seems pretty solid to me so far. As respect for property rights is fundamental to maintaining a free and prosperous society, it follows the freedom to contract to obtain, retain, profit from, manage, or dispose of one's property must also be upheld. Yeah. Libertarians would free property owners from government restrictions on their rights to control and enjoy their property so long as their choices do not harm or infringe on the rights of others. Yep, do whatever the fuck you want as long as you're not hurting anyone. Eminent domain, civil asset forfeiture, governmental limits on profits, governmental production mandates, and governmental controls on prices of goods and services, including wages, rents, and interest, are abridgments of such fundamental rights. I say for the most part, yes, you need to have some sort of eminent domain, but I don't think it should be like a forced eminent domain. Like, it can be an offer, a reasonable offer, an actually reasonable offer, not the current offers that we've been seeing, but like a reasonable offer, the property owner is fair to say no, but a reasonable offer needs to still be allowed to be made. I don't know if that's the point that was making, that in and of itself shouldn't exist, but that needs to happen for government to function. And then controls on prices of goods and services, that's good. Let's not do controlling things like that. For voluntary dealings among private entities, parties should be free to choose whom they trade and set whatever trade terms are mutually agreeable. Yes, I agree. Environment. Competitive free markets and property rights stimulate the technological innovations and behavioral changes required to protect our environment and ecosystems. Private landowners and conservation groups have a vested interest in maintaining natural resources. Yes. Governments are unaccountable for damage done to our environment and have a terrible track record when it comes to environmental protection. Yes. Protecting the environment requires a clear definition and enforcement of individual rights and responsibilities regarding resources like land, water, air, and wildlife. Where damages can be proven and quantified in a court of law, restitution to the injured parties must be required. Yeah, that last part comes into play if like a company fucked someone's land up by dumping on their land when they didn't have permission. That I think go to court and restitution happens. But at the end of the day, the market forces do a lot. We just don't let it do a lot in America because we try to control it too much. The market forces do a lot, and you can see this with the left companies on the left doing it, right? You have companies that signal to doing things, promote certain charities, do all of these things, right? Do cleanup projects. So they do all of these things because it gains them customers. That is the market force in action leading to these things happening, especially when you consider that people have a free right to boycott and things like that if they don't like what a company is doing. While energy is needed to fuel modern society, government should not be subsidizing any particular form of energy. We oppose all government control of energy pricing, allocation, and production. I would say yes to this. There are some exceptions if you're in like emergency situations, but in general, yes. Finance and spending. Since all persons are entitled to keep the fruits of their labor, we oppose all government activity that consists of the forcible collection of money or goods from individuals in violation with their individual rights, and strive to the eventual repeal of all taxation. To further that end, we call for the repeal of the income tax, the abolishment of the IRS, and all federal programs and services not required in the U.S. Constitution. This is very perfect world, right? The idea of it, I think, is really good. In reality, I don't think it's that good. Getting rid of income tax and placing it to be a sales tax instead, I think is perfectly fair. I think that's a pretty good idea. The rest of this, you kind of get into like fairy tale land where we need some of these things. And at the end of the day, we have to have them in some form, at least in the way that our current society functions. And trying to just get rid of that, at least in one fell swoop, will be horrible for society. We oppose forcing employers to serve as tax collectors. Yeah, that's fair. We support any initiative to reduce or abolish any tax and oppose any increase on any tax for any reason. To the extent possible, we advocate that all public services be funded or allowed to be provided in a voluntary manner. Yeah, so again, this to the extent possible is doing a lot of work here. At the end of the day, you need fucking tax revenue. Trying to abolish all taxes is fairy tale land, all right? It's kind of like communism is fairy tale land, right? Abolishing all taxes is the same thing. But that being the driving idea to get lower taxes and to change our tax structure is a good thing. Government debt. Government should not incur debt which burdens future generations without their consent. We support the passage of a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, provided the budget is balanced exclusively by cutting expenditures and not raising taxes. I'd be down with that. I also don't consider it raising taxes to get rid of loopholes, right? Because to the extent that we have taxes, that is the current system, I would say that it is to an extent a violation of taxpayers' rights for someone else to not be paying the taxes that they should be. That's not on the people using the loopholes. That is on lawmakers to make sure that the loopholes don't exist. Government employees. We favor repealing any requirement that one must join or pay dues to a union as a condition of government employment. Yes. We advocate replacing defined benefit pensions with defined contribution plans, as are commonly offered in the private sector, so as not to impose debt on future generations without their consent. To be honest, the pensions and like this shit, I don't really give a fuck about. The like forcing people into a union, I completely agree with that. That's why we even start that in the first place. Money and financial markets. We favor free market banking with unrestricted competition among banks and depository institutions of all types. Markets are not usually free unless fraud is vigorously combated. Those who enjoy the possibility of profits must not impose risks of losses upon others, such as through government guarantees or bailouts. Yeah, I can get on board with that. We support ending federal student loan guarantees and special treatment of student loan debt in bankruptcy proceedings. Individuals engaged in voluntary exchange should be free to use the money as mutually agreeable commodity or item. We support a halt to inflationary monetary policies and unconstitutional legal tender laws. Ending federal student loans, I'm pretty sure those overall make the government money. So I don't think that that's actually really an issue. Like when people pay them off, they make the government money. Special treatment for student loan debt. I don't think there should be special treatment for any type of debt. So yeah, I would support that one. Yeah, stop inflation. And I don't know exactly what's being referenced here, so I'm just gonna kind of not talk about that one. Marketplace freedom. Libertarians support free markets. Yes. We defend the right of individuals to form commercial enterprises based on voluntary association. We oppose all forms of government subsidies and bailouts to business, labor, or any other special interest. Government should not compete with private enterprise. Yeah, in general, yes, this is kind of like the oil thing to me, where in emergency situations, I could see this not being the case. Like I could see exceptions. Like for example, right when you have COVID, I think it's fair for the government to subsidize the development of a vaccine. In general, I would agree with this. Licensing. Libertarians support the right of every person to earn an honest and peaceful living through the free and voluntary exchange of goods and services. Accordingly, we oppose occupational and other licensing laws that infringe on the right or treat it as a state-granted privilege. We encourage certifications by voluntary associations of professionals. Yeah, because we're specifically talking about like the state making you do this, so I would agree with this. I think that a company has every right to say, no, you need to be licensed, or you need to have this certification, right, to work here. For example, like food handlers. But it shouldn't be a state-mandated thing. Sex work. The Libertarian Party supports the decriminalization of prostitution. Yes. We assert the right of consenting adults to provide sexual services to clients for compensation and the right of clients to purchase sexual services from consenting sex workers. Yep, 100% yes. Labor markets. Employment and compensation agreements between private employers and employees are outside of the scope of the government, and these contracts should not be encumbered by government-mandated benefits or social engineering. Yes, in general. We support the right of private employers and employees to choose whether or not to bargain with each other through a labor union. Yes. Bargaining should be free of government interference, such as compulsory arbitration or imposing an obligation to bargain. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I guess the only sort of caveat, which I think that the Libertarian Party would also support, just based on consenting adults being a theme, but having different requirements for minors in the workplace versus like adults in the workplace, I think is fair to be government mandated. Education. Oh, it is being talked about. Education is best provided by the free market, achieving greater quality, accountability, and efficiency with more diversity of choice. Recognizing that education of children is a parental responsibility, we would restore authority to parents to determine the education of their children without interference from the government. Parents should have control of and responsibility for all funds expended for their children's education. I'm assuming this is talking about like voucher system sort of thing, which, yes, I would agree with that. Healthcare. We favor a free market healthcare system. Medical facilities, medical providers, and medical products must be freely available in the marketplace without government restrictions or licenses. We recognize the freedom of individuals to determine the level of health insurance they want, if any. Yes. The level of health care they want, the care providers they want, the medicines and treatments they will use, and all other aspects of their medical care, including end-of-life decisions. Yes, yes, yes. At the end of the day, with freedom, people make stupid decisions. But I'm glad that they have the ability to make the stupid decisions if they see fit. People should be free to purchase health insurance across state lines, yes. We oppose governments either mandating or restricting voluntary access to medical treatments and procedures, including vaccines. Yep, I agree. Retirement and income security. Retirement planning is the responsibility of the individual, not the government. Yes, thank you. Libertarians would phase out the current government-sponsored social security system and transition to a private voluntary system. Yes. The proper and most effective source of help for the poor is the voluntary efforts of private groups and individuals. We believe members of society will be even more charitable and civil society will be strengthened as government reduces its activity in this realm. Again, yes. At the end of the day, we are also just day to day in terms of like paychecks and shit, losing money that we could be putting directly towards people who need it. But you're taking it and you're putting it into Social Security. And a lot of that money, not like a big portion, but at least some of that money is going towards paying employees that work in these departments and shit, which is just wasting the money rather than actually just straight up giving it to those who need it, which you can do on an individual and like personal level. All right, securing liberty. What do we got to say about liberty, boys? National defense. We support the maintenance of a sufficient military to defend the United States against aggression. Yes, the United States should both avoid entangling alliances and abandon its attempts to act as a policeman of the world. We oppose any form of compulsory national service. So yeah, that would be like the draft. I also think that we should get rid of the draft. That's fucking stupid. And when it comes to the US acting as a policeman of the world, in a very general sense, I agree. But I do think that when there are egregious human rights violations, that we have a duty to do something about that, right? In some way. And that is where I would say you can become the policeman in a sense. Internal security and individual rights. Individual rights shall not be curtailed, whether based on circumstances of war, epidemic, natural disaster, or emergency or any other pretense. Yes. Intelligence agencies that legitimately seek to preserve the security of the nation must be subject to its oversight and transparency. Yeah, 100%. We oppose the government's use of secret classifications to keep from the public information that it should have, especially which shows that the government has violated the law. We oppose the use of torture and other cruel and unusual punishments without exception. I agree to this last one. This public information, the idea is really good, but there are definitely things that are unsafe to, whether it be military personnel or some other personnel, like directly unsafe for certain documents and stuff to be released. So those I am perfectly fine with staying secret, because at the end of the day, if you release them, you are opening a US citizen up to being killed in some circumstances. But other than that, I think it's pretty fair to have that be open and public knowledge. International affairs. American foreign policy should emphasize peace with all nations, entangling alliances with none. We would end the current U.S. government policies of foreign intervention, including military and economic aid, tariffs, economic sanctions, and regime change. Regime change, and to an extent tariffs, I would agree with, to an extent. I do think that, again, it comes back to what is the reason behind it. And if it is, in fact, egregious human rights violations, I think that we do have a moral duty. Free trade and migration. We support the removal of governmental impediments to free trade. Political freedom and escape from tyranny demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained by government in the crossing of political boundaries. Economic freedom demands unrestricted movement of human as well as financial capital across national borders. When we're talking about this in a trade sense, I agree. I also support people's right to asylum, but you do need some level of security on borders. Rights and discrimination. Libertarians embrace the concept that all people are born with certain inherent rights. We reject the idea that a natural right can ever impose an obligation upon others to fulfill that right. Yes. We uphold and defend the rights of every person, regardless of their race, ethnicity, yada yada yada. Government should neither deny nor abridge any individual's human right based upon sex, wealth, ethnicity, creed, age, yada 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 yada, including political preference. I think that's important. Anyways, members of private organizations retain their rights to set whatever standards of association they deem appropriate, and individuals are free to respond with ostracism, boycotts, and other free market solutions. This is another one where I am recently more and more on the agree board with this one. Representative government. We staunchly defend the rights to petition the government for redress of grievances, to express dissent. These rights are thwarted when government acts behind closed doors. We support election systems that are more representative of the electorate at the federal, state, and local levels, such as proportional representation, alternative voting systems, and explicit inclusion of none of the above on all ballots. Yeah, I'm down for that. I'm down for all that. As private voluntary groups, political parties should be free to establish their own rules for nomination procedures, primaries, and conventions. Yeah. We call for an end to any tax finance subsidies to candidates or parties, and the repeal of all laws that restrict voluntary financing of election campaigns. I want to say yes, and I also want to say no to this, because at the end of the day, the way that this has started to show itself is just corporations running this. So if we're talking about actual private individuals, I have no problem with this. When we're talking about multinational corporations, I have more of a problem with it. We oppose laws that effectively exclude alternative candidates and parties, deny ballot access, gerrymander districts, or deny the voters the right to consider all alternatives. Yes. We advocate initiative, referendum, recall, repeal, and oppose any effort to deny these options when used as popular checks on government. Yeah, pretty fucking solid there, buddy. Last section. Self-determination. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of individual liberty, it is the right of the people to alter, abolish, or withdraw from it, and agree to such new governance or none as to them shall seem most likely to protect their liberty. We recognize the right to political self-determination, including secession. Exercise of this right does not require permission from others. Yeah. Every time that I say yeah, it is because I'm agreeing with what has been said. And I feel like the amount of fucking yeahs, can we get a yeah counter? Someone comment a yeah counter. If you made it this far, someone make a yeah counter. Yeah, so I primarily agree with all of this. There are some slight disagreements, and most of them aren't even just full disagreements. Most of them are just going into a little bit more detail of like, I partially agree, partially disagree. So, for anyone calling me a LINO, you can suck it because you're wrong. We're going to do Republican Party platform next, so that'll be posted probably next week. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys for doing the shit, doing the follow, like, subscribe. I don't know how YouTube works. Leave a comment. That's all I got for you. I will see you in a couple more days, or you can see me probably sooner on Twitch.